Pick it up from the offline.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this morning's edition of the Wise Life podcast. And my very, very special guest this morning will be Allison Jeffereys. She's a transformational life coach, best-selling author. You can find her book on Amazon. And public places you can find her is LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Allison, welcome to my podcast this morning. And maybe as an opening to get started, can you tell us how you got started into, like, how you got started in the process of transformational life coaching? And like, we hear that term a lot these days. So could you tell us how you define that transformational life coaching process?
Everything's a journey. It just is. And I'm a work in progress. So I kind of want to share a little bit of my journey. So your listeners can understand why I'm so passionate about what I do. Okay. I'm a woman. And as we all know, life, has changed over the last 100 years as to how we live as women. I got caught up in that generation that, my heart's passion was to get married, raise kids, be a mom, do that gig. And life intervened and said, no, you will go to college. You will go to college. You will get a degree. And then once you do that and you're the first one in the family to get a degree, the expectation is you will go to work, you will have a career, you will do something with your life, which is, of course, what I wanted to do. But I went into the corporate world, worked there for about 35 years, held some pretty interesting positions. The one that really impacted me the most for what I'm doing today is towards the end of my career, I worked at Citigroup and I worked for a women's financial education platform. And so my job was to teach the men how to work with women and the women how to engage with the men and their money. Well, honest to goodness, the program doesn't exist anymore. And after 3 years, the reality was I was beating my head against a brick wall because you can't change people's wiring in just one presentation. We're all wired differently.
Yep.
So I left there. But at the time when I was working there, I was going through my second divorce. And I, knowing what I know about me, that I wanted to be happily married. I wanted to find my person. I wanted to have that fulfillment in my life. And I realized that, 2 times already had done something wrong. It was time to work on me. That the equation had to be balanced and it started with me. And so I stepped back from it and I started journaling and I started writing, which is my way of expressing myself, because I had bent all my friends' ears too many times and I couldn't do that to them again. So I just started writing and I sat on an airplane traveling 2 to 3 round trips a week. Every woman that sat near me, what are you writing? And a minute I'd tell them, they'd give me their stories. They're telling me their life experience. And so what ended up happening was my journaling became my book, A Woman's Guide to Surviving Divorce. It is about the divorce process, but it's about how we're wired and how we as women experience the loss and how we rebuild. It's a validation because as women, what I learned working in that program, thinking, oh, this is cool, I'm going to go learn all about men. What I found out was that having been raised by a 6'5" military officer for a father, 2 older brothers that I grew up with, 2 ex-husbands, and raised 2 sons, I knew a little bit more about being a guy than I knew about what it meant to be a woman and why I went through life thinking there's got to be more.
Yes.
So rock and roll along, corporate career ended, when some financial stuff was going on and I was like, hey, let me take the layoff. I don't want to be a part of this. This is ugly. And so I took the layoff and my husband gave me the biggest gift ever when he said, please, you're burnout. You're fried. Stay home. Don't go back to work for a little while. Take some time for yourself. So
now, this is your 3rd marriage, yes?
My 3rd marriage, yes. There was a long time in between that job.
Just clarifying. Clarifying for our listeners.
Yeah, this is my 3rd marriage. Coincidentally, I finished writing my book and put it away for 8 years. picked it back up again, finished the ending, because you can't write the ending till you've lived it. So the last 3 chapters of the book are laugh, live, and love, which is where we all should end, in laughter and living a great life and loving it. And then I put it away again. And a month later, after I finished the book, that's when I met Jeff. And it was, as they say, kismet. I had waited a long time for him to find me. And I knew there was a good man out there looking for me. And when he found me, I might just let him catch me. And he found me, and I let him chase me for a while. And, we both knew that this was it. And we've been together now 13 years. And,
Wow.
It's getting better every day. I'm just blessed. So, he's a good man and allowed me that time to find my place in this world and make that difference that I always wanted to make, growing up. And so it's become just my purpose, my passion. My goal is to help elevate women because, women are exponential.
Mhm.
And when you help one woman, when you help lift her life, when you help her with her happiness,
suggest something else.
she takes everything you have and then she turns around and shares it with her community.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
so it makes what we're doing lift even more women.
Yep. And
So
I agree with you. And so two points. So that sounds to me that we're moving into that idea of how we transform what transformational means to you. So there's that.
Mhm.
The other side here is like, when you're talking about kismet, I'm remembering what you've said here earlier on the call. And it's, when you decided to work on you is when you were found by your significant other, or who would become your significant other, because
Mhm.
we actually attract that which we are, what we're ready for, right? So wherever we go, there we are. And I'm hearing these themes in your share going forward in this whole thing of transformation and uplifting women, which leads me to a couple questions. Let me think here a minute. One of the beautiful things I think about lifting up women or a woman is that when you uplift her, as you've said, you lift her whole community, but it's not only is it every other woman she touches, it's every other child and man she touches because of how we function as women. Our job is to hold that. Now, some people will listen and disagree with this, and that's fine. But from my perspective, part of our job as women, part of how we lead is actually we hold that very safe space for the man or men in our lives, family members, brothers, significant others, you name it. We lift them up. We're their safe space, and we lift them up so that they can go out there and, be that arrow point or that armor point, that leading point. We're their safe spot. That's part of how we lead is we lift them up. And sometimes this exchange of energy, I'm turning sideways so people can see this exchange of energy between masculine, feminine forces in the physical is misunderstood as in less than, more than, that whole thing. And I love, yeah, exactly. It's just different. I love this idea that you have of transforming and lifting up and how that transforms communities. So can you speak into that or share some of your experiences or observations of how that plays out for people, how that shifts the individual's life and then the community that they affect?
It's if I could draw a picture of it, it'd have every beautiful color in the world in it. The idea behind it is, and I started out as a divorce coach, helping women through the divorce process, and given my history, my experience working in the financial industry, as well as the real estate and legal side of things, that was easy for me because I could help people through the nuts and bolts. But what I learned within the first few years of my coaching was that most women, as they're going through the divorce, they're not ready to face the reality of who they are and embrace themselves yet.
Yes, often.
And that is my absolute favorite part of the process, is lifting these women up and helping them go live. So, my 30 seconds of what do I do? For me, everything is, there's the process and there's the past, the present, and the future. The past is gone, but it haunts us. The future hasn't happened yet, but it scares us. All we have is the present. So what I try to do with my clients and help them, first of all, make peace with their past. look at everything that's happened and realize it's done, it's gone. The only reason it haunts you is because you're allowing it to.
How do you help them see how they allow that past in, or how they allow it to affect them? Because I feel like a lot of people really don't understand how to let go or how to disengage from what affected them then when they're in the now.
I do a lot of work with neuroscience to explain how this monkey brain up here works. The nerve synapses, I have another name for it, but it includes a 4-letter word, so we won't say it here.
Got it.
But it's about understanding how this works and how it's wired and how we came to be who we are. And so, first of all, every woman has a story.
Yes.
And one of the things that is cathartic for us, think about this, if you've ever been to a business conference and had to share a room with a woman you didn't know. You might have been in the room for 2 or 3 days. By the time you were done, somewhere in all of that, you sat down and told each other your story. Okay? We don't get to do that very often. We don't get to do it from beginning to end. And we don't get to do it in an environment in which we are not judged.
That last one I find, as a woman, and also what I observe in the world, to do it with another woman in a way that you aren't judged. Often, you've probably seen this in some form or another, but often what I observe is that when women dress nicely, it is actually for other women. We'll say there's this whole thing that we're doing it for men, but actually it is for other women because of this thing about being judged and how you're perceived. Because men are, frankly, much more forgiving in my estimation than another woman of another woman. And so I find that that's actually rarer for women to experience that safety in the community of womanhood, I guess. To have that experience of safety and non-judgment is very, very rare for a lot of women. And I think a lot of women actually aren't necessarily cognitively aware of that. They're just used to swimming in these waters that don't quite feel safe all the time, always trying to measure up. And part of what I'm hearing you say is that you help them come into a warm pool where it is safe, where they can be themselves so that they can actually see themselves. Is that, yeah?
Yes. And it's because, first of all, if I'm working with a woman, there's something going on where she needs to know she's loved. So I talk to my clients a few times before I ever work with them. All my clients usually come to me through referrals. And so I talk to them a few times before I even say, hey, let me help you. Can I help you? Because if I can't help you, I can't help you. And I'm not going to tell you I can. And that litmus test for me is, are you ready to take this journey? And second of all, can I tell you I love you? Because that's something we don't hear enough in life. And it's something I didn't hear enough in life. And it is a staple of my vocabulary. And I use it with all my friends. I use it 100 times a day with pets, animals, air, trees, whatever it is. I want to say I love you. I say it. And so I want to be able to say that to my clients. So it is about the 3 things I tell my clients up front I cannot do, or I will not do. I can always, it's my choice, but I don't do. First of all, I can't tell you what to do. It's your life. I'm here to help you figure out what's right for you, what makes sense for you, what works for you, and who you are and who you want to be. I am not going to judge you, because honestly, if there's a mistake to be made, you're looking at the girl now on her 3rd marriage. If there's a mistake to be made, I've either made it or wanted to at some point. Okay. And so who am I to judge? Who am I to judge? You're on your own journey. I'm here to help you make sense of it. And then the 3rd thing that I'm not going to do is make a decision for my clients. The decisions are theirs to make. And so it's about helping them learn how to make decisions that honor who they are and what's important to them. So in that process of letting go of the past and telling me that story, I take that story And I don't hear it as a 7-year-old little girl. I don't hear it as a 20-year-old woman that's had her heart broken. I don't hear it as a 36-year-old woman rebuilding her life and worried about her children. I hear it as someone who's lived all of that, been through it, listened to thousands of women telling me their stories. And then I turn around and I tell their story back to them in a kinder and gentler way. Because we get trapped in our story.
Yep.
And when we are the victim in that story, we stay victim. When we can
Absolutely.
rise above that story and see that story from that place of reality, in that, yeah, stuff might have sucked. It did. I get it. But you are who you are because of everything that's happened to this point. And if you're my client, I see all kinds of beautiful stuff in you. I see all kinds of potential. And so my job is to help the women see in themselves what I can see.
I think too that one of the nuances of what I'm hearing you say, and I'm having this memory in my, in my early, I'm trying to remember the year frame. I don't remember the exact year frame, but I'm pretty sure I was in my 20s. I remember I went through a really, really rough period in my life. And I won't get into the details here, but I will say that the mere act of taking a breath was a phenomenal feat for me during that time period. And I had this mind-blowing experience where I got up one morning and I was working on a piece of writing for, I think it was a college project, it might have been a publication, I don't even remember, but some writing project. And I was writing and I had this thought occurred to me and I wrote it down, and it was just very simple. It was this: you are not your story. And I think that very, very often, all human beings, men and women, but we women are prone to it, is taking that story and seeing it as our identity, who we are, because we've experienced it, right? And woven into that identity and that story is all of the projected judgments that we've experienced, that we've somehow internalized in our unawareness, right? That judge us. And so I think it's actually really rare for women to hear their story reflected back without those judgments, that just see you as you are without all of those, I'm going to call them layers of either judgment or somebody else's observation or preconditioned lens of observation, because nobody, I always say there's no such thing as no bias. That doesn't exist, because everybody sees through the lens of their experience. So there's always a projection of an opinion, which is not the same as a fact or what is. And it sounds like one of the really powerful things you do is reflect to women who they are without all those layers, from kind of a I want to say fresh perspective. And yes, that's there, but it's more than that. It's more than a fresh perspective, because what I'm hearing in the underneath of what you're saying is that you have an ability, partly because you've walked that road. Maybe you can flesh out what more is there, but you have an ability to sort of see the core of who someone is. And that is reflected in how you tell their story back to them. Yes?
Yes. And, just sometimes I just know stuff that fills in the blanks. Can't explain it, but it's there. So it's a point of giving them their story back in a way that instead of life happening to them, they can see that life happened for them.
Yes.
And so once we get to that place, then I have a meditation that we do that helps release a lot of those hurt points. Knowing that, they're going to come back up, but now you have a tool how to deal with them. I give them a tool to deal with any of those hard spots in life, and how to go within and be able to look at this objectively, not from the emotional standpoint, but from that higher standpoint with which they now see their own story. Who are they? And what is happening for their highest good? So that helps them make peace with their past. Then it's about falling in love with the woman they were born to be. Okay, as women, and
Yeah.
like
so
you
do
said,
need both?
not everybody's going to agree with
You
me,
wanna
but
say
what
just
I
process
found
That's
in
fine.
my
and
experience
what-
is that as women, we are wired differently than men. And my big disclaimer when I used to do my presentations for the women's financial thing is, women and men are different, not better, not worse,
Different.
just
Yep.
different. And if you took psychology and you look at the 101 Psych 101 bell chart, where it have the two big
Oh, you're
graphs,
talking
Yep.
about like
any
going up
behavior
to
you
level 2 or
measure
3.
with two different audiences, whether it be men and women, old people, young people, whatever, you're going to have two different bell curves of the median of their behavior. So
Absolutely.
with all the women that I've interviewed and talked to while I was writing my book, all the women I've coached, all the women I love in my life that we've, I have the confessional, so everybody always calls me anyway. So all of my friends, it's, you begin to see the patterns, you begin to see what's going on.
Yes.
And you start understanding who we are. And as women, we are born to nurture and nourish.
Okay, so
Men are
maybe
born
2
to
bullets.
provide and protect.
So maybe 2 bullets under this one are
That's the way we're wired. That's the
showing
evolutionary
level
thing that
4
we'll go to, or you can go to the
related
divine
processes
masculine
or
and
showing
feminine. It's
relationships
all over the internet these
amongst
days.
level
I've been
4
using these words for
processes.
20 years.
And then another bullet
And now
would be,
everybody all over the internet is using those words. Nurture,
aligning
nourish,
with
provide, and protect.
level
It doesn't
3
mean
above
that a
processes.
woman cannot provide and protect. My God, I did. I did for 15 years.
Yeah.
I had husbands, I had children. I provided for them. I protected them.
Yeah.
Because I was put in a role that was not what I wanted, but didn't know how to not be there. And so that's what I had to untangle for myself. And I help women untangle that. Who are you? Down deep. Who are you? And there's a quote by Maya Angelou that I like the best. It's one of my favorites. It's, I know I'm somebody because God don't make no junk.
That's right.
And so if you start with that premise that you are somebody because God doesn't make any junk, now let's figure out all the beautiful things about you, all the wonderful things about you, all the things that you should have pride and respect for yourself about.
How do you get women there who are, I imagine that when you're dealing with women who are working through a transformational process, that sometimes you will run into resistances to actually seeing the very things that you're talking about that we think of as positive or preferred, right? Mm-hmm. That you'll run into resistances. And I say this, as a leadership coach over here, I run into, when I'm working with belief systems, I run into what we'll call blocks or resistances. Yes. How do you navigate that or help a woman navigate that when, for example, maybe they don't believe they can do something because they've received a message in marriage or at some point in their life, that's part of their story, right? That they can't, or that they are something that is less than who they are. How do you help them navigate that to see the reality of who they are?
2 different ways. One of it is helping them through some different inventories that I use different books and inventories that they can do on their personality that helps them see who they are from a personality standpoint and see how cool it is, how different they are, how unusual and special they are. And then at the same time, it's about helping them understand, and we go straight to neuroscience. How do we rewire this? How do we take that thought? Because the voice we hear that has the most influence on us in our lives is our own.
Yes.
It's the one up here that until we were 7 absorbed all the stuff the world had to say to us as if it were truth. It's the one that holds on to every hurt, every ill comment, every you're crazy that somebody said to you. If you've ever been divorced, you've been called crazy. It just happens that way. I don't know. All those things, and they become your default mechanism in your brain. You don't know. You don't know any better, so you keep beating your own self up.
I totally agree with what you're saying in that the default programming. I'm just going to add a layer here, but one of the things that I also see is that 0 to 7 is sort of a standard measure. So if you're dealing with anybody who is operating with speaking neurologically,
Okay, so that's not-
neurodiversity. They're
Mm-hmm.
neurodiverse. They're not in that average bank. Oftentimes that number actually increases. It's not 0 to 7, it's 0 to 8, 0 to 13 even. Sometimes
Mhm.
all the way through, those buffers are not the same for every person.
Mhm.
And so I'm just putting that for our listeners out there, that like if you're listening to us and you're in any kind of if you are neurodiverse, understand that default programming may have had a longer stretch with you, or maybe something that you still are processing. And so I just want to put that out there for our listeners, because we don't realize that sometimes, and it's not something I see spoken into a lot. I'm just adding
Mhm.
that into.
Okay. Yeah. And everybody's different. So that, these are all generalities. But the idea is to help the woman learn. First of all, you've got to know what the faulty thinking is and what you want to replace it with,
And another
what
goal,
serves her.
below that,
And so it's a
talking
matter,
about-
and I work with the 4 agreements. I love the 4 agreements. They're such a great foundation to helping you untwist all of this. And so
How do
I
you-
work.
Go ahead. I'm curious, but go ahead.
So I work with them using the 4 agreements, which are agreements that you make with yourself. They're not my agreements with you. They're not your agreements with anyone else. They're my agreements I make with me
Parking lot
and agreements
property,
you make with yourself.
you pick up
Mhm.
And then they become kind of
a parenthetical,
your path to getting
Yeah.
where you want to go.
future
And
consideration.
in that process of falling in love with herself, she goes to that place of where life either happens to you, you're a victim. And when you're a child, I'm sorry, you're a victim. Life happens to you. It just does, because we have no control as a child. When we become an adult, we actually have control over everything. If I ever do a TED Talk, the title's going to be "It's Always Been Your Choice." The problem is nobody freaking told us that.
Okay.
Sorry. It was, this is what you should do. This is what you must do. This is what I want you to do. And I'm going to be mad if you don't do. So we go through life meeting all those expectations of everybody out here. And we're living life from the outside in.
Yep.
When in reality, if we live from the inside out, what do we need? What do we want?
Why
What
are
do
you
we
saying not?
expect out of life? And what do I want to experience? And put that first. Doesn't mean as a woman, we're not going to do something because our kid needs it, or our husband needs it, or a friend needs it. But that we know it's a choice. Because when we get into relationships, there's what I call a resentment accommodation cycle. And it happens between you and your children. It happens between you and your spouse. It happens between you and your coworker, or your friend, whatever, where, we're women. We accommodate. This is what you need. I'm living from the outside in. My goal is to make sure everybody else is okay. I would rather do this, but I can do that. So I'll do this and I'll accommodate what you need. But we don't understand this was the choice we made. And so we begin to feel bitter and resent. And eventually, when we have accommodated so much, the resentment builds to a point where the relationship is pretty much no longer functional. And we don't even know how we got there. We don't even know what it is we're so angry about or resentful about. And we don't know that we had the choice all the way along. And so it's about learning how to honor what you chose.
That you're raising the point perfectly, because I was thinking of the 4 agreements, and you just explained something to me in my relationships, my friendships with other women, where in my past, I would look at them and think, whoa, wait, how did we get here? Because I don't operate from that. So I never understood it when another woman would, and then get upset with me because I was aware of the choice. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
But so you're explaining this to me from a different perspective, because as a woman in my woman friendships, when another woman would be in, what did you call that cycle? Something.
Resentment, accommodation, resentment.
Yeah, accommodation resentment cycle. So many women are in that, from my experience, it just in friendships with women. And I would sit there and look at them. What are you doing? So that's really informative for me from that perspective. But what's interesting is you kind of have brought me into this understanding of how you work a client partner through that, how to be impeccable with your word. Because when I think of that, being impeccable with your word, like, and I've studied the book. I'm a big fan of Carlos. So, so the point that I'm making here is like when we are impeccable with our word, when we understand what that means and we live from that space, we actually can't have that cycle that you're talking about. So I was going to ask you, how do you teach them? How do you show them to be impeccable with their words? And you just answered my question. So then I want to go like to the next step. How do you help them with the next step? How do you help them get there?
Well, each of the steps are, you have to experience them one at a time. First of all, we read the book, we sit down and we go, oh my gosh, this is foundational. I'm going to do this. And then we wait.
Oh, that doesn't help.
No, it doesn't. And the problem is that you have to understand the process. So it's that convergence of neuroscience and how we understand this and how we work with the brain, monkey brain, to change it from bad neuropathway to good neuropathway. First, you have to recognize the bad one that you don't want anymore. And I'm calling it bad and good only because they're words and they work. Okay. But the one you don't want and the one you do want. You can't change what's going on up here until you know those two things.
Yep.
Okay.
Awareness.
So, and then you have to know, and that involves making choices of what's right for you. So as you're changing things, and then you implement them one at a time. And I go through that process of, okay, here's the first one. Here's what we're trying to accomplish. And there is the problem with all of this neuroscience is no one writes down the process to do it. How do you implement and how do you do this? And so what I've learned is, and I call it the clutch process. It's like if you've ever driven a standard shift car.
Okay. That's what I learned to drive on.
Yeah. And they start out and they're jerky and you're all over the place, but then all of a sudden it becomes very, very smooth.
Right.
Well, you need to learn the process of driving the standard shift brain, of how to shift your brain. So it starts with you think something or say something that you realize doesn't serve you. I just called myself stupid or crazy or worthless or whatever. First, you have to recognize it. Oh, wait a minute. That's what I want to change. I don't want to call myself names anymore. Okay, so how do we change that? Well, if you're driving a standard shift car, what's the first thing you have to do? You have to put in the clutch, which disengages all the gears and the engines and everything else from rolling. So you have to give yourself a clutch. And it's a clutch phrase. It can be anything you want it to be. It can be, did I really just say that? Or mine is that really who I choose to be?
Or even just merely pausing.
Yeah, and wow. But having that clutch phrase is part of the process, because then it becomes your default. It's like everything. It's you're driving a car now. I don't think about pushing in the clutch. It just happens. So you have to do the process step by step, at least 31 times, or however many times they say, 6 weeks, whatever. I say 31 times until it becomes your habit. Right. So it's catching it, throwing in the clutch phrase, and then saying, okay, now do I want to stop? Do I want to go faster, or do I want to go slower? You have all those options once the clutch phrase is in. So then you think, okay, so what do I want to replace this with? Okay, you know what? So we do the investigation. So when I tell myself I'm stupid, well, let's look at the facts here. Let's see, I graduated from high school with a 4.2 GPA. I graduated from William and Mary with a solid B, having worked 3 jobs all the way through. I raised 2 kids and worked full time for Fortune 100 companies and had a very successful career and wrote a best-selling book. No, I'm not stupid. I'm not stupid. Okay. And that's really hard for women to do, because that feels like bragging. It feels like, oh, how could she say all those wonderful things about herself? So it's about learning who you are and being able to acknowledge the good. And so I've now just taught you how to say, when you call yourself stupid or worthless or less than or not enough, you throw in the clutch, you stop the motion, you figure out what the problem is, and then you figure out how you want to rewrite it. Hey, I'm pretty smart. this is cool. And then you rewrite that phrase and so you say, so the truth here is, I'm a very smart woman. And then you let it go. And then you're going to go, you have to keep coming back to it and coming back to it every time you make the mistake of saying the wrong thing, recognize it, row in the clutch. If it's a common one, you don't need to keep doing the proof, but it helps.
Mhm.
It helps because our brain, once we put that proof in there that says, I am a smart person, our brain is wired to look for that response, to look for
Yes.
that supporting evidence.
Absolutely.
So
Yep.
the minute I say I'm stupid, I am going to turn around and do 10 inane things that I shouldn't have done just to prove to myself that I'm stupid.
Exactly. So it's knowing
Versus,
how.
Mhm.
So part of what you do is you teach women how to begin to operate our neuro operating center, how to use it in a way that serves them, because there's a couple things that come to mind as I'm listening to you speak. One is that frankly, many women are taught to be the good girl in those early foundational years, and that the good girl, if you will, really is synonymous with being accommodating and denying yourself. So that's there in the underneath, right? That's there in the underneath programming, the default programming, we'll say. But then let's say you grow up, you have some proofs that show you as a woman that maybe you're good. Maybe a woman goes through school and she gets good grades, maybe she gets a good career, then she gets married and she has kids. Well, suddenly she's put in this nurturing role. She has to show up for these kids. It's important, right? That all falls right here on her. And then she has the husband and she operates the household and she falls into that default role without even realizing it, the good girl, the accommodator. And it's amplified because she has one or two or however many children, little ones, relying on her. And it creates a dynamic in the marriage where she stops listening to her impeccable truth and starts accommodating that cycle that you're talking about. Correct me if I'm wrong anywhere here. So one of the things I'm wanting to just kind of point out for our listeners, because I have a lot of experience in a handful of fields, is that the framework that you're providing as transformation for women is like, I have worked with plenty of PhDs and people who are psychologists and psychiatrists, et cetera, in my time. This is a really solid framework that I've seen the top people use in those fields. Not your framework that I'm hearing thus far is actually taking away steps and getting someone there in their own way just as well, if not much better, than people who are in those fields. And I'm kind of wanting to point that out because I'm like looking at this transformational life coach. I'm going, transformational like needs to be like in capitals or amplified or something, because you're actually taking apart the foundational programming. You're showing them how to do that for themselves and how they can begin to pinpoint where they're not honoring themselves and where they are and why for themselves. In other words, they're going through this process of becoming a self-led woman.
Yes.
Versus
coming from the inside out rather than the outside in.
Yes. I know we've covered like 2 steps, and I know that you have more. So
hold on. Well, so let me diverge
Please.
here on the good girl, because you're cracking me up. That's actually in my book. It's in my book, and it's when people say, and again, divorce is not my bailiwick. It's helping the women recover, rebuild, recreate, love their lives. So it's like, how did we get there? And so one of the things, how I help a woman see the truth is, number one question: what is the number one cause of divorce? People say money, adultery, this, that, and the other. No, it's far more simple than that. Far more simple. You married the wrong person. It's that simple. You married the freaking wrong person. Just saying. Okay. It's not his fault. It's not your fault. The two of you did this together. But when you come to that base realization, you just married the wrong person, it makes understanding you can let it go much easier, because there's no fault and blame and disgust and all that gets added into it. There's no finger pointing. It's like, we both did this.
Yeah, and it's not a match.
It's not a match. And here's how this happens. Okay. So the good girl, we're raised to be the good girl. So let's define the good girl. She's obedient. She plays well with others. She doesn't talk too much. And she follows directions. We can all agree that's a good girl, right?
That's a basic good girl mentality. Yeah.
So I was researching information for my book and I had put that in there and I was like, well, let me look up the definition, and I don't advise anybody else do it because they have hijacked the good girl and it now pulls up X-rated sites and all kinds of crazy crap. And I was like, this is just shows you how bad our society's gotten, is you can't even be the good girl anymore. Okay, fine. So now we go into our marriages as the good girl. And I'm like, how do I find a definition? You know, what can I look up that gives me the right words to use? I looked up qualities of a good dog. You try it. Look up qualities of good dog, and you're gonna. It's so the definition it was doesn't bark too much. Okay, so
yeah. Ouch. And
so we go through our lives. We go through all our crap. We become these vibrant, happy, ourselves kind of people somewhere in that, you know, young woman age, or, you know, and then I did it again after my first divorce, but apparently not well enough. And we become who we are, and we're strong and we're resilient and people are attracted to us. And then we get married and we turn ourselves into the family pet.
Yeah.
And can't figure out why this isn't working. Well, he's dissatisfied because you're not the woman he married. And you're dissatisfied because he's not treating you like he used to. We broke him. Okay. I'm just telling you, so half the time we broke him. You can take a marginal man and turn him into a piece of shit, no time flat. Okay. So if you married,
women don't understand that power.
Yes. And if you married the wrong person, that's where you are. Okay. And so it takes all of the judgment out of it to say, I married the wrong person. And then it went south. Can you know, I've helped people fix their marriages. If there's enough left to be fixed, and if you still want to be there, we work on you. We can't fix him. You know, can't fix him. I can't fix you. You have to fix yourself, but I can give you the tools to do it.
Absolutely. And I love that approach, by the way.
And so when you get to that place where you fall in love with the woman that you were born to be, because that's all we've got, right? That's the present. That's the present. We've let go of the past. We know it's there, and every now and again, stuff pops up, but now we have tools to deal with it.
Right.
Okay. And as everything we clean up, as we go through the 4 agreements, every time we layer on another agreement, we get just a little bit more relief and a little bit more relief and a little bit more relief till we learn to implement all 4. And then we can keep ourselves up here.
Right.
Because we're not beating ourselves down. And when someone else comes at us with that mentality, we recognize it and we stop it cold in its tracks.
Yeah.
Okay. We know how to set boundaries now. We don't have to put up walls that we wall ourselves in and put ourselves in prison. We can create boundaries, which are like little picket fences. They're for us to protect, but they're there, and we can let people know they're there. And then they make their own choices. And we get okay with the fact that everybody else has the right to make their own choice, because I have the right to make my own as well.
Right.
And then it becomes looking at the future instead of from fear, but out of love for yourself. What do I want it to look like? And more importantly to me, what do I want it to feel like? You know, what does it feel like in here to be happy? What does it feel like in here to be fulfilled? What does it feel like in here to be loved? Right. Because, you know, and more importantly, when we do those things, then we can forgive.
Absolutely.
It's so easy to forgive someone else, but yet why can't we forgive ourselves?
I think often that we don't see ourselves because we're still seeing through those overlays that we learned when we were young, and then those layers that get accrued on those agreements we make as we move through life, especially in relationship. One of the things that I'm recollecting as I'm hearing you speak is like the process of like When I was much, much younger, one of the, I guess, clutch questions, to use your frame, one of the clutch questions that I used for myself to help me see myself more clearly in my 20s was, I wouldn't, my good friends, I have great friendships. I could not ask for better friends. Do I have millions of friends? No. I can name the friends on, very limited amount of fingers here, what I call true friends. And I consider myself very lucky. But my clutch question was, I have absolutely stunning friends that I can rely on, that I can trust, that I can tell anything. I wouldn't allow my friend to treat me like this. Why am I allowing my significant other? If my best friend spoke to me the way I'm speaking to myself, they would not be my best friend. Man, that clutch question reframed so many things for me in my 20s. It was like, I got to fix this. It helped me see how I was being with myself. And so I wanted to touch base on that because I think that the building the clarity part of what you're talking about, having those clutch questions, seeing how we make these agreements about who we are that aren't really who we are, but then we start operating from those agreements, actually gets women into all sorts of messes. And you have this wonderful process of helping them basically untangle that mess and disengage from it, recognize who they are, and not only recognize who they are, but then go for stepping into that, embracing that, and moving towards the life that they want to experience. Yes?
Yes, yes. And so it's about reframing your story, not for anybody else out there,
For you.
For you, because then when you tell your story differently, people are going to treat you differently.
Exactly.
Because it's like getting to that, when you go to a place that has music and they have some star there, but they're just using the guitar and it's the stripped down version without all the fluff and the whistles and bells. It's about getting down to that stripped down version of you. The song may be great with all the production, but there's so much more beauty in the simplicity of the voice and the guitar. And how they weave together to create that music. And that's kind of what we are. Yep. We are that thing. And, it's about understanding your role in it. And then it's about teaching people how to do it, we call it the Build a Man Project. And I promise you that I had my list before I met Jeff of qualities and characteristics that I was looking for in someone. And it serves, that Build a Man list serves the purpose of, you don't date anybody that doesn't match your list, because why bother? You don't need a free meal.
Right.
You don't need that heartache.
Right.
And when you do find someone that matches that list, then at least you've got a good starting point. You've met your needs. Because there's a thing I do with my clients, I call it the 8 people. We don't realize that in every relationship, there are 8 people.
Yep.
Okay. We think it's
You're
between
talking about the imprints. Yes.
Two consenting adults get together, 2 people in a relationship. No, there are 8. There's who you are and who he is. Now, we've already talked about the fact that we don't know who we are and they don't know who they are, because we don't know how all this stuff got in here. Okay. Yep. So who I am and who he is really doesn't matter, because I don't know who I am and he doesn't know who he is. So then we get to the second couple in it, which gets all kinds of fun. Who I think he is and who he thinks I am. Now, what's that based on? That's based on absolute garbage.
Yeah.
So we got to throw that one out. So now we're getting desperate, because now we're in this relationship and we're trying to figure out how to navigate this relationship, and it ain't working quite right. So we get to the third couple, which I call the pretzel couple. And it is who I think he wants me to be and who he thinks I want him to be.
Oh boy. Now, that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. So take a twister board, spin the wheel, and tell someone to put their hand on an octagonal purple dot. There isn't one on the board. So now you've got these people twisting up who they are, trying to be what they think the other person wants them to be, which is never what they really want them to be.
Right. This
And
is like go ahead.
It's a twisted mess.
Yeah, it's a chosen disassociate identity, not who you are, which is very, very different. And if you can't connect with who you are and you're operating from a chosen disassociate identity, that person doesn't really know who you are because you're operating from that chosen disassociate identity. That's a mess happening. One of the things that's coming up, and I know we're coming up on time. One of the things that's coming up in my mind as I'm listening to you speak is how you're. So some people are really turned off by this idea of writing a list. They'll be like, "Why would I do that?" But I kind of smile when I'm hearing that because I'm thinking, how many people, and to me, this is almost like a generational thing because I think back to, there was this really wonderful violin teacher I had in my college years, and because I was a music major to start with. And she was sharing with me one day about a lesson her husband was teaching their daughter who was in her teens. I don't remember how we got in the conversation, but she was sharing with me that, and at the time I remember being like, and it makes so much sense to me now, but she was sharing with me that her husband was teaching their daughter that you can be friends with anyone and you can be kind and friendly with guys, but do not marry somebody that needs a mechanic. In other words, don't get involved with a young man whom needs fixed. And they had this whole criteria. We had this whole conversation around it because I had not heard that before. And so I was curious and asked her questions, but they were teaching their daughter to evaluate on this way. And I had never heard that before because I'd heard about falling in love. I'd heard about people, who going after their dreams, going after their heart, but I hadn't heard any like strategic, critical thinking. But that brings me all the way back. If you go back and you start looking at the old families in the South and the old families in the Northeast, those families actually raised their kids with a certain kind of honor and decorum. Those old value systems actually taught men and women, and same in the indigenous society that I spring from. We were actually taught to measure people on the value system they operated by and how healthy they were in it as potential mates. It wasn't just a heart decision. It was also a decision based on strategy of whether they would be a good partner. And I'm bringing this up because I don't see that very often. People push at that list, but I'm like, well, wait, if you don't have any measure of understanding of what value system you're coming from and whether your value systems mesh, you can't actually connect. Yeah.
Correct. And so that's the fourth couple that comes in. That
Thank you.
In a healthy relationship, a friend of mine told me the first three. She had heard them, and I was like, wow, that's really interesting. But there's no solution here. There has to be a solution. So I came up with a fourth couple. And this ties very neatly into, your list. Because the list that you make is not, I want tall, handsome, lots of money. Okay. That's not what I'm talking about. That's not what I'm talking about.
Oh, come on. No, I'm teasing.
No, it's, I needed someone that was good at what they did, was confident, loved life, had the same faith values I had, sense of humor, loved animals, loved being outdoors. What was that? That was the person I needed. That was the person I needed. What do I need in a spouse? What do I need in a friend? And that goes down to those core fundamental values that we live our life by. And I teach my clients, when we talk about love, which, if there's only two emotions in the world, which I believe there really are only two, fear and love. Everything else comes out of either fear or love. So when you can get to that point where you say, am I acting out of fear or love? You pick love and you're going to get the right answer.
Boom.
But it comes down to that idea of when we know what it is we need in a relationship. I need to be respected. I need to be loved. I need to be valued. And we write our list based on people that have those same characteristics and those same sensibilities.
Yes.
When we meet someone, and I will tell you that the cool part was in both my first marriages, there was no faith.
Wow.
We may have gone to church or whatever. And I may have christened my first son in the Catholic Church because he was Catholic. But there was no religion, there was no faith, there was no worship together. And so when I finally got to that place where I knew I deserved somebody amazing, I also knew I deserved an amazing relationship. And so for me, that meant including faith.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was on my list. That was on my list. Doesn't mean we had to be the same faith, but we had to be walking on that same spiritual journey, that same path,
Right.
with the
Yep.
same concept of what that meant, who we are,
Yes.
and what we're supposed to do here. Not supposed to, but big picture stuff. And the night we met, we were sitting at my kitchen table. I had cooked dinner and friends had introduced us, and we sat there and we talked. And at the end of dinner, he just looked at me and says, well, I like everything I see, but I have one deal breaker. Well, this was language I spoke because I had deal breakers on my list. Unfortunately, he didn't drive a motorcycle and he didn't smoke, so we were good. Okay.
Okay.
And I said, okay, lay it on me. And he says, have you been saved? Now, if you got chills, it's because I get chills every time I think about it. Because that was that final thing that was so important to me. And so now our relationship, and I think part of the strength of that relationship is because it's built on a common foundation.
Yes.
And a common understanding of who we choose to be and how we choose to express ourselves in this world.
Yeah.
And what we want to be, what we want to achieve and accomplish. And when you get to that place, no, there's no guarantees. There's no crystal ball. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I'm not worried about tomorrow anymore. I'm loving today. And today I'm blessed. And today I have it all. And as long as I can hold on to that today, I can do that again tomorrow.
Yes. What a beautiful place to be, right? And what a beautiful journey to go on. Allison, I want to thank you so much for coming on to the podcast with me this morning. And I want to just, are there any particular takeaways that we haven't covered or things that you want our audience to hear before we hop off and that kind of thing?
No, I just really appreciate this conversation, Andrea, because I'm, as you can see, I'm passionate about
Yes, I love that.
how important this is, not only because I've done it in my own life and I'm a work in progress. I love this work because, if this is what you do, you kind of hold yourself to doing the work to keep moving your life where you want it to go.
Absolutely.
But it's about seeing the transformation in people's lives and seeing the joy and seeing what they've been able to accomplish by just learning how beautiful they are and how worthy they are and how special they are. And they learn to see themselves the way that maybe you and I can see someone. That stripped down version that is, amazing.
The underneath, I call it. So we went over in the beginning, we went over where people can find you. Do you have any kind of groups or what are your offerings for folks before we hop off the call here?
Okay. I do have a group on Facebook.
Okay.
It is based around, I started it back when I was doing the divorce coaching, and because it's there, I just keep it. It's Surviving Divorce Online Community for Women. It is a free group.
Okay.
The highlight of the group is every Wednesday night, I do an online coaching call.
Oh, beautiful. Okay.
So we all get together. It's just women supporting women. I've got women in the group that have gotten divorced 2 and 3 years ago, but yet they still enjoy the camaraderie, the support,
the community,
and the fact that they can then give support to the new women in the group. And so we so it's just a place for women to come and get support if they need it. So it doesn't matter if you've been divorced or not. That's not the point. It's are you on the journey of self-discovery. And then I'm on LinkedIn, and the best place to find me is either LinkedIn or Facebook. or you
And
can
you-
just email me. Well, don't email me. I never check my email, but sorry. But just, reach out to me through LinkedIn or Facebook. Send me
Yeah,
a
shoot
direct
a message. Yeah, direct
Mhm.
message.
and
and
I'll
then-
get back to you. And
and you- Go
the
ahead.
big thing is don't think that if you call me, I'm going to make you want to pay me or whatever. That's not the point. If I think I can help you, I'll offer. If you think you want to work with me, we'll figure it out. Typically, I will talk to somebody a couple of times before we even decide if this is a journey she's ready to go on. And
Beautiful.
then we'll talk about it. Typically, when I coach somebody at 6 months,
Okay.
I do something very different than most coaches. You're working on yourself. This is deep work. It's not something we can just visit once a week and tap at. You're not going to get anywhere that way. Sorry.
Okay.
I've got clients who say I've been to a therapist for 10 years and I haven't gotten anywhere. They go in once, they talk, they leave. No, I talk to my clients twice a week. It includes emergency calls if stuff goes south, because it happens and I'm here.
Mhm.
And typically we work together for about 6 months. First part, making peace with the past. The middle part, falling in love with yourself. And the third part, designing a life that you will love. Figuring out what that looks like and how you achieve it. That's what
Thank you for that. That's tremendously beautiful. So there you have it, folks. And I honestly can't recommend Allison highly enough, because she does a really hybrid deep dive that will transform your life and how you view yourself and how you show up in that life. We've talked a bit about talk therapy on my podcast before, so those of you who are following me will know this, but talk therapy really only goes so far. What Allison is offering is a safe space for people to tell their stories, but she's also equipping you with tools so that you can move forward and transform yourself in your life. Allison, thank you so much for honoring us today with your presence on the podcast, and we'll talk soon.
Okay. And thank you, Andrea. I appreciate you.